Meeting to order. We got 6 board members present. 2.01, approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Brian, seconded by Dennis, that we approve the agenda. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 6-0. 3.01, receive comments from the public. Okay. Moving on. 4.01, board reports.
I have a short one.
Okay.
I decided to go to the FOOPE meeting just to see how it was, and one of the things I think communication needs to be improved, and I don't know how you do this unless you're on the board, you know what happens, but education of the public about what we do and what we don't do. You know, we make policy, we don't do a lot of other things that they think we can just run down and talk to a teacher or run down and talk to whomever, and we can't do that. And so I think maybe just a informational kind of thing. I don't know exactly how you do it, but something like that. They talked about class size, and Lewis did some research on that, and our class sizes are relatively the same. I mean, there's ups and downs, but relatively the same since a long time ago. They're looking for a volunteer group to help the teachers. I mentioned that we had a volunteer group several years ago, Bucket Brigade, and that was elementary, to help elementary teachers with kids that needed help in reading, and that, I don't know how many years it went, probably 3, 4, but the leader, and it needs a strong leader, and the leader had to give it up because of health reasons. So they're looking at the volunteer part. They're looking at the technology part again. They were talking about the reason for dropouts, and we are already working on ways to help that, and so I had reported that. And what we have in place obviously isn't taking care of it, but we do have some things in place. And they had things like some misinformation. I don't know if they just got it from one person, but the teachers used to get $250 and now they only get $200, and I said $125 is the most I'd ever seen. So, you know, it depends on what school, what PTA. A lot of the times the PTA will give teachers money for the classroom things, and I don't think that's in our budget at all. I think that's just the PTA, PTO, whatever. So anyway, I plan on going back, and I think, have they contacted you, Dean?
No, they haven't.
No, they're going to.
Since their meeting.
They want you and a couple of board members to come to their next meeting, but I probably will go. I decided I'd just go and sit and listen and see what happens. So.
Yeah, the first meeting was interesting. So
Did you go to the first one?
I did. Okay. It was a good meeting. I mean, they had a lot of good conversation, but it was very anti-board.
Mm-hmm.
I think over time that'll change with, like you said, communication and with educating the public and whatnot as to what we actually do as a board. But yeah, it's definitely, you know, my impression was anti-board, at least the first meeting.
It was still there, watered down maybe some, but it was still there, and I just thought it might be nice to have somebody there, maybe to take care of some of that. You know, I don't know, but just like the misinformation thing part, then we could clarify that.
I think they've been assigned different people to different buildings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and going and talking to principals and whatnot, and those all seem to be very positive and good. So I think that'll be, the attitude will change the longer it goes, and really do some good things. So
Yeah, I hope so.
I like the idea of that group.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be good for Ottawa, but it's just getting there that I think it's gonna be a little bumpy.
Mm-hmm. Well, and for them to accept what they can and can't do, and what we can and can't do.
Right.
Yeah. So that's all.
Does anyone else have another board report? All right. 4.02, superintendent report.
First, want to just found out today that Ottawa Middle School was recognized as an Avid National Certified School. There's 12 criteria that they need, or 11 criteria that they have to meet, and they did meet all of those, so they did get a certificate and some national press about being a national certified school. So that was some good news coming from the middle school. The next thing I just want to review, and as it comes up here, are the graphs. This, I think, was in the Topeka paper, a link to this. But it kind of explains a lot of the things we talk about throughout the budget process and, well, throughout the year, actually. And the first graph, as Kim pulls that up, but it's the state general fund split, how that is divided. And there, it'll be up in a minute. But 50.87% of the state budget goes to K-12 education, 25.8% goes to human services, and 11.53% go to higher ed. So obviously that is the brunt of the budget. Public safety 6.6%, and general government is 4.5%. So when we have these discussions about state funding and everything, I mean, and we already knew this, but looking at the graph, it's a huge piece of the pie chart there that goes to K-12 education. And when we talk about that, it's good to understand it. The next graph, the K-12 spending per pupil, the state average, the high year was in 08-09, and that was $12,660 per student. And again, figuring that they throw in everything, the LOB, the capital outlay, bond and interest, everything gets thrown in that figure. The low year was 2010, 2011, and that was $12,882. And what we had talked about the last meeting, what Ottawa's number was for last year was 11,199. So that's obviously we're well below the state average, and we were the lowest in the county, but interesting things to look at there. The history of K-12 revenue sources, and this is state, local, and federal money. The state aid high year was 01-02, and the state paid 56.21 in state aid to fund schools. Now, I don't know what Ottawa's rate was at that time. Right now, I think we're around 46, 47% in most things. The low year was 51.3%, and that was in 09-010. And what they're projecting this year as far as the revenue from state aid is 55.65. On the local side, local revenue, the high year was 38.83%, meaning that 38% of schools' budgets was paid by the local taxes, whether that's LOB, property, all of those things. The low year was in 2001, 2002, and that was 33.6%. And they're projecting local revenues this year to be 36.51. And I think, the things that we've seen, and most of you heard when Landon Fulmer talked about this governor's recommended budget, I think those numbers would go quite a bit higher if they changed the funding formula and put that more on the local, either property tax, local sales tax, however they decide to make up that difference. The federal funds, these are the three funding areas, state, local, and federal. The high year was in 2009, 2010, and the state received 13%, or schools did, in federal funds. The low year was 08-09, and that was 7.3. Projected this year is 7.82% that budgets will be funded from federal dollars.
Dean,
yes.
does anybody have the same percentage back to 90 and 91 before they did the current school finance law? Because we changed it all in 92, 93. I'd be curious to see what those percentages were before we did this current school finance, you know, to see how much was the local and how much was the state.
Maybe we can find that out from Mark this weekend. I bet they may be reviewing some of that, but that'd be a good question.
Because even if you look at the last 10 years, it's been fairly within a percent.
Fairly flat, yeah.
Yeah. And then history of Bay State aid per pupil I thought was interesting. The high year was 08-09, and that was $4,400. The low year, out of the ones on this chart, was 96-97. That was $3,648. Currently, this year, we are at $3,780, and that is just about the level at the 2000 level is where we were, about that level. Now, if they cut the $36 that we've been talking about, if they don't put more money in the formula this year, then we'll be down to 3,744. In 05-06 is when they changed the formula. When you see that spike on the chart, and that's when they added money to Bay State aid per pupil, but reduced all the weightings. There wasn't new money that went into education. They just changed the way they funded it. So that's kind of deceptive to look at that and think that that was all new money and we received this big windfall. It went from $3,863 to $4,257. But in reality, that was a very small, if any, increase that year. And in reserve funds, the graph on the reserve funds, you can see the increase, and that's something we keep getting criticized about, the amount of money that schools have, and I'll be the first to say there are some districts that probably take advantage of that and they're not spending, not doing the things, in my opinion, they probably should be for teacher salaries, those things. But on the other hand, you have to go back to the middle of the year cuts that have been made the last several years. And
How
then
many years running have we had the middle of the year cut?
I think it's been three, the last 3 years, and possibly this year.
All three. The year before I came on the board and the next 2 years I've been on the board, we cut.
Yeah, in the middle of the year, and then we don't get the money on time to pay the bill, so we have to have that. And our reserves aren't, out of line. We did a comparison before. And,
Well, and Dean, you look at this one on the reserve sheet, the question I would have is how much is that tied to the bond covenances to make sure you have your bond indebtedness in the bank for 1 year's payment? And that ties to a lot of the substantial growth when you look at bond issues that were issued the last 3 or 4 years.
I mean, and you look at the number of bond issues that have passed just the past several years. I mean, some major bond issues. Wichita had, I don't know how many $100 million bond issue there. Even Garden City, theirs was, I think, $100 million.
100 million.
So
this doesn't surprise me.
No.
I mean, when you start looking at the bond indebtedness account, which is your reserves, it doesn't surprise me that we're there.
Yeah, yeah. But I thought that was interesting information, and it's on the public website or page there under the agenda, and kind of good to refer back to. Reminder that next Monday, December 5th at Baldwin at 6:30 is the forum that Terry Lois Gregory is hosting with Dave Trebert, I believe is how you pronounce his name, from Kansas Policy Institute, and then Mark Tallman from KASB will be there talking about school finance. I will not be able to be there, but I believe a few of you, and I think Dr. Kraus was going to be there.
And that's in the auditorium, correct?
That's in, yeah. Is that in the high school or high school? Okay, but right there. Yeah. But if you can make it, I think that would be good. KASB sent out the information on that and wanted to encourage people to attend, and that would be a good one. That's my granddaughter's Christmas program on. So I'm gonna
You'll be
miss the
otherwise
fun.
occupied.
That's where I'm gonna be too.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's my daughter's birthday.
Let's talk about KASB convention that starts, actually, I don't think we have anybody going Friday, but Saturday. Who's all going to attend? Did you get registered? Did you?
Tour.
Okay,
Yeah, you gave it to me, I'll do it tonight.
Yeah.
okay, so, and in Marge, I know you and myself.
Did I get that turned into you, or am I behind?
You did, you're behind.
Could you register me, please?
Anybody else?
About all I could handle would be the morning, Saturday morning, but
Okay. Who wants to ride with me? Brandon? Marge?
Yeah.
Dennis?
Yeah, but let's see how it goes. What time you leaving?
Probably, let's see, on Saturday, probably about 6:45.
where is this at again?
Overland Park.
Overland
Park
Park
Convention.
Convention.
Oh, Overland Convention, okay.
Convention Center. I think it starts at 7:30. You'll have to, the delegate assembly, I put the agenda.
Yeah, delegate assembly starts at 8:30.
8 o'clock is
8 o'clock is when it
the
starts.
entertainment part of that, but, and then the clusters start at 8 o'clock. That ought to be plenty early, but let's plan on 6:45 then,
Here,
at the middle school.
middle school.
Yeah. And then Sunday, the governmental relations starts at 7 o'clock, which I wanted to attend, so I was gonna leave like at 6:15.
I'm not gonna be able to be there.
Okay. Marge, are you gonna,
I'll get back with you.
okay, anybody else going
I'm probably
Sunday?
not gonna go Sunday.
Okay. But I'll be there
I'll be
for-
there, but I might not be riding with you at 6:50. I may stay
Yeah.
up, I'll have to see.
And did we ever hear back, am I supposed to do anything on board docs? That, I don't have to do anything, okay, okay. So I'll go to that, and I don't know if I'll stay for the later session on Sunday, but, then Sunday it'll just be myself probably,
No, I'll be there.
yeah.
It's not a lunch anymore, is it?
I don't think they're doing the
Breakfast
luncheon this
thing?
year because so many people left, early to drive wherever they're going, and so I think it's just the meeting, and they dismiss at 11:30, I believe. Well, it says noon on here, but one of the other brochures I saw 11:30.
Okay.
But, so, okay. Any questions on any of those things then? All right, that's my report.
All right. 5, policies, contracts, bids, estimates, agreements. 5.01, approve the 2010-2011 audit. Mr. Mays.
This is what everyone's been waiting for, so.
Now, as an accountant, this is always a highlight in anybody's year.
Okay, I'm going to go over highlights, so if you've got questions as we go along, just flag me down and we can talk about them at that point in time. If you turn past the table of contents, it's the report of independent certified public accountants. Basically, our responsibility is to give an opinion on the financial statements. And it's a long-winded way because we have to say that you're not doing general accepted accounting principles. You waive out of that each year. But if you look at the second to last paragraph on the page, it does say that we have an unqualified opinion as far as the presentation in all material respects to cash and unencumbered cash balances of the individual funds of the school district. There's a couple paragraphs that follow that. One of them is to let you know that the audit was done in accordance with governmental auditing standards. And there is a report letter back at the back that addresses that. And then on the next page it says, Our audit was also conducted to form an opinion on the financial statements, but there's also some supplemental information, one being the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, and we give you basically an opinion on that, saying that we felt like we tested it against the records and supporting documentation and feel that it is fairly presented as well. You go back to page 3 and 4. Actually, you've got enough funds that actually goes over to 5 and 6. You get to see a summary of the individual funds. The more significant changes this year is if you look at unencumbered cash balance, third column from the right there, at the end of the year, your general fund, your supplemental general fund, even though the general fund has a bracket around it, it's still up $236,000 from the year before, and your supplemental general is up about $405,000. Other funds that showed a significant change, the at-risk is up about 90, capital outlay was up 130, professional development was up about 100,000, and your special education was up 160,000. There was a couple of funds that went down. Contingency reserve went down 218,000, and textbook went down 130,000. Just quickly on the textbook, the reason it saw a significant drop was due to the fact that there was a change in curriculum. More books had to be ordered. There's about $460,000 worth of books and textbooks that were ordered this year. So even though there was some large transfers from general and supplemental to help supplement that, the fund still, you used part of what had been in there from previous years. Capital outlay, the contingency reserve is down. And I think that was due in part to some of the renovations, what have you, that was going on within not only this building but others. Let's see. At risk, the reason it went up is at the end of the year there was some transfers made from the general fund supplemental to help try to beef those up for some upcoming events in this year. I think that was the same case for professional development and special education, which is always one of those tough ones because one or two kids, one way or the other, can make you or break you on that particular fund. So it's always a tough one to go by. But anyway, that gives you an overview of the funds as a total. And for the year, you're up about $725,000 in unencumbered cash compared to the year ago. Page 7 and 8 is a statement that basically shows how you compare to budget by the individual funds that had a published budget as required by the state. So basically what you're looking for over there is you don't want to see something with the brackets around it. As long as you're at 0 or above, you're within the Kansas statutes, which say that you're not supposed to expend above your budgeted amounts. Couple of definitions here. The adjustments to comply with legal max, that's only shown, generally that's on just the general fund. And the reason for that is that you guys do a great job of deciding what your budget's going to be, and then the state tells you what it's going to be after you get done with it. And they basically cut you $275,000. The adjustments for qualifying budget credits is basically those funds that you receive during the year that aren't budgeted. Your reimbursements, your grants. In particular, you had your grant for the jobs education for jobs, which is about $407,000. Those actually increase your budget authority, and that's the reason they're added back in to come up with what your total budget of $14,982,000 for the general fund, which left you budget room of $454,000. You go to page 9 and 10 and 11, and basically we have to present the general fund and the supplemental general fund twice. This presentation up front is made without those state aid payments that come in right at the beginning of the next year. This is the state's requirement, the Division of Accounts and Reports. Then we turn around and show those particular payments actually added in a footnote, so that we show the Department of Education that you ended up budget-wise where they wanted you to end up at anyway. So you have a dual presentation because of that for these particular funds. So don't get too, and I should have brought this up when I was looking at Statement 1, but On statement 3, page 11, you got a huge $1,013,167 unencumbered cash balance. Well, that isn't where your cash balance is at, because there was state aid payments that came in after that to cover most of that. Supplemental general, same thing. Only the state had actually kind of reversed a little bit on the supplemental general from prior years, and actually you're getting the payments a little bit more on time and a little less of a growth each year. So it ended up showing $97,000 up in front. So looking at those two, I would like to take you quickly back to page, let's see, page 77, 78, and 79, 80. And here's where we're showing the presentation of the general fund and the supplemental general based upon the way the Department of Education wants to see it. And the only difference between these two presentations, the expenditures are exactly the same. It's just in the revenue side, and it's in the one particular line item, and that's the state aid payments. This one back here shows those July payments that came in that the Department of Education considers to be for this year, whereas the one up front does not. Okay, flipping back here a little bit. I think if we go to the footnotes, which start on page 65. Really everything between the footnotes and here is basically those presentations of the individual funds. I really wasn't going to go over those in too much detail unless somebody had a specific question. When you get back into the footnotes, they start off with describing what the entity is as a whole, whether you have what they call component units. Component unit is basically someone who's so closely aligned to you that either their sole purpose is to assist you, i.e. like an endowment or what have you, or they're so closely related to you because their funding depends upon receiving that from you. And Ottawa Recreation Commission obviously is one of those cases where if it wasn't city and school district together, they wouldn't have the funding probably to keep running their programs the way they do. Communities and schools is another one that is so closely aligned with you. Its main focus is to help actually the students of the district. So the communities and school gets rolled into the entity, and we just have to tell everybody else that as far as the Recreation Commission is, it's not included in the financial statements. So we're just telling everybody what's included, what's not included in that footnote. Then we go on to talk about the basis of accounting, which again is something you decide on an annual basis to be cash basis and budget laws of Kansas. So there's nothing too spectacular or different from there. We talk about your compensated absences, your ad valorem taxes, what your budget process is on page 68. Page 69 talks about what your legal debt limit is, which is basically a formula based upon your assessed value of tangible property. School districts are not supposed to exceed 14% of that unless they have permission from the Department of Education and the state of Kansas for that. Right now you have an excess indebtedness of $14 million, but you received approval from the state of Kansas for that, so you've gone through the proper procedures in order to have that debt limit where it's at. Let's see, depository securities or deposits and investments on page 69 talks about what kind of investments you can invest in, where your funds are at this particular time, and how they're invested, and whether they're secured and at year end, either through FDIC coverage or pledged securities you were fully secured on the funds you had deposited at the bank. After that, we talk about a few more of your other policies. Page 73, 74 gives you a kind of an outline of where your debt is at the present time and what years it's going to be due in. and it extends out to the maturity of those particular ones, so you get to take a look at that. And then we talk about, let's see, compliance with the statutes on page 75 is going back to that fact that we have to show on the next two pages, the general fund and supplemental general fund, in accordance with what the Department of Education wants to see rather than Division of Accounts and Reports. Page 82, not only are you required to have an audit by state statute, you're also required to have an audit because you have enough federal funding, i.e. over $500,000 in expenditures each year, that require that you have a financial audit and a compliance audit. And that's what this page is doing, is showing the amount of federal funding that you've had and expended during the year, which this last year was $3,193,000 from the federal government. And that includes not only if a grant's received direct, but if it comes indirectly through the state of Kansas to you guys. So that shows all of the federal funding, federal dollars that are that were available for the school district. Because of that, we have to give an opinion on your compliance, and that's on page 84. First, we have to give an opinion based upon governmental auditing standards, which basically gives an opinion on internal controls over financial reporting and also compliance on financial reporting. And as we've indicated in these paragraphs, it's a negative assurance. We don't test 100% of everything that you do. We pull samples here and there, but basically what we're saying is based upon what we tested, we didn't have any issues that we needed to bring up. Otherwise, they would be listed in this report and actually spelled out. So again, we say that we have no material weaknesses, and we do feel that you were in compliance with the laws and regulations that apply to the school district. And that's things like making your deposits for payroll taxes timely, to any filing requirements that you might have, as well as your reporting requirements. On page 85, we have to give an opinion based upon the federal dollars alone. This is carving out all those grants that you receive, and then we have to give an opinion as to whether you were in compliance with those grant requirements and whether you have internal controls to make sure that you're in compliance. And on both of those, again, it's a negative assurance, but we're saying that we did not feel that there was any deficiencies that need to be reported as far as internal controls go, and that as far as compliance with requirements, we felt that you were in compliance with your requirements on your federal programs. Page 87 is the schedule of findings and question costs. It's a nasty nasty name, but basically what it is the federal government wants to look in one place to see what a summary of what the findings were for the entity. So our type of report was unqualified or clean opinion. We had no material weaknesses. We had no significant deficiencies that we noted, and there was we didn't have any non-compliance of financial statements that we had to note. Material weaknesses for the federal programs, again, we had none. Significant deficiencies, none were reported. And our opinion as far as compliance with federal awards goes was an unqualified opinion. So therefore, we had no findings that needed to be disclosed. That's then listed down below. There's the major programs. We look at, we pick certain programs each year and we rotate them around, trying to keep, kind of keep guys guessing as which one we're going to look at from one year to the next, what it amounts to. And this is what we consider the major programs for this year that we had to take a look at. All that type A, type B thing, where it talks about the dollar threshold, is the federal government has this little semantics that they make you do, that here's the total federal awards, here's the types of grants that you receive, and they want you to put it in buckets of whether it's over 300,000 or under 300,000, and you have to pick so many out of each bucket. So that's what that's about. And you guys did qualify as a low-risk auditee. It means you haven't had any findings for the last couple of years that need to be reported, or else you don't qualify as a low-risk auditee. Anybody have any other questions they'd like to ask? Well, just real quickly, the two other letters that she handed out tonight, one is we refer to it as an audit committee or a governance letter. The one that's not in a binder is basically what we're supposed to do is report directly to you. And not to management, but directly to you, whether we had any issues while we're performing the audit. First of all, we have to state why or what our responsibility is, what your significant policies are, whether we had any issues as far as significant audit adjustments go or disagreements with management. And basically the whole way down through here, we're saying that we didn't have any of those types of issues that needed to be reported, but we're supposed to disclose that to you each year and let you know that we didn't, or if we did, what those issues were. The second one that's in the binder, it's just a few pages, is some actual I guess the best way to describe this is that I talked about material weaknesses and I talked about significant deficiencies. Obviously, those have a connotation. Material weaknesses being the worst, significant deficiencies being kind of bad. And then we can have other issues that we want to bring up to your attention, and that's what this one's doing. We just had one activity fund balance that was over at the year end that shouldn't have been, and that's what that's referring to. But down below, the top one is the one I hate the most, that I'm now having to do for most entities that we prepare the report. If we prepare the report and the disclosures, then we're supposed to indicate to you that we did that. And that's what we're doing there, is telling you that that was something we did for you. It's something we've always done. We do it for all of our municipalities, but it's a requirement now to let you know that, even though you probably knew that we'd doing it for all these years anyway. So that's what that top one's talking about.
Excellent report, Harold.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harold.
So you need to take action on this?
Yes.
Approve it?
I make a motion, we approve the audit.
Second.
Been moved by Susan, seconded by David, that we approve the audit as presented. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0. 5.02, approve Pam Langston to be released from teaching contract.
And that needs to be with regrets, health issues, and just something that we need to do to help her right now. Hopefully things will get better.
So moved.
Second.
With best wishes.
Moved by Susan, seconded by Dennis, that we approve the release of Pam Langston from her teaching contract immediately. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0. 6.01, executive session for negotiations.
How long, Brian, do you think we need? Let's do 20.
How about 8 o'clock?
Yeah.
Mr. President, I move the board go in executive session for the purpose of discussing matters related to employer-employee negotiations, whether or not, in consultation with representatives of the body, the board return the open meeting at 8 o'clock in this room. The executive session is required to protect the district's rights to the confidentiality of its negotiating position and the public interest.
Second.
And it's inviting in.
Dr. Krause.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by Brian, that we go into executive session for negotiations to return at 8 o'clock. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
Back into open session, please.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by Brian, to come back into open session. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
Mr. President, I move the board go into exec session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters for non-elected personnel, and the board return to the open meeting at, how long, Dean?
Let's do 20 for that.
At 8:30 o'clock in this room. The exec session required to protect the privacy interests of an identifiable individual.
Second.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by David. We go into executive session until 8:30 for personnel. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
Second.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by Brian, that we come back into open session. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0. All right. 9.01, announcements for November.
8.01.
Personnel.
Oh, sorry, skipped one. I'm trying to move ahead. Personnel, 8.01.
Recommend that we approve the new hires as posted.
Second?
Moved by Brian, seconded by Susan, that we approve the personnel report for this meeting. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0. Now, 9.01, announcements.
We already talked about some of these things, but just as reminders, tomorrow night we have legislative dinner at 5:30 at Neosho County. Saturday, or Friday and Saturday, the NKASB, we've talked about that, made the arrangements. Monday the 5th, we talked about the school finance forum at Baldwin High School, 6:30. Next board meeting is December 12th. We have, if anybody is interested in going to the next chamber breakfast, that's December 15th at 7:15. And we do not have a second December board meeting scheduled. So we probably won't have that unless there, we can have a special meeting or something if need be. But right now, the second Monday would be December, or fourth Monday would be December 26th, which obviously we wouldn't meet that day. But right now, we're not planning on having a second meeting. Yes.
When is the payola? Is that by the first, second week of January, the payola, the thing that we go to every year with the
Legislative.
legislators?
I haven't heard anything about that.
Okay.
But see, Rod Allen isn't there, so I have a meeting tomorrow morning in Paola. I'll ask
Usually
about that. Yeah, we usually have something by now.
Isn't it around the
Yeah.
It's the first week in January.
5th
Yeah.
or 7th or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll ask tomorrow,
Thought it's
March,
been a
and
good-
see if I can find a date.
It is a good one.
Uh-huh.
And that's
Usually they get
pretty much
everybody
it.
there.
A lot of people.
They get a lot, all the legislators.
President, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Moved by Brian, seconded by Susan. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Sorry. Bing the mic.
Well, I only have to install one update.
I didn't have to do anything.